Hi, Paul Thompson here. Today, a short video in which we're going to get to the bottom of inversions and how you can use that to boost your creativity, generate new musical material from your existing themes. And this is going to have some really interesting stuff about modes in it as well. So watch right through to the end. I think you're going to find a lot of really useful tips in here today. So I've written a little theme. Let's play it first. Okay, so here is the theme, and here are the chords that go behind it. I've copied this over in this Logic session, so we've got an exact copy here, and what I've done here is I've split the strings, which is just an ensemble patch, into a more closely voiced top part and then the bass part on its own. Now the reason for that is I'm going to show you the first thing about inversion. Now what is inversion? Well, it's when you flip your musical material about an axis. Now you have two options here for the most very basic way of doing this. The first thing is you can either choose your current root note as the axis, in which case what you end up at the end will be in the same with the same root, but it'll be a different mode. We'll talk about that in a second. Or you can choose a different note as the axis, and that will give you a new key. It'll open up a new key. Now, and that can be really, really useful. So I'm going to start off by showing you how you do this in Logic. So the first thing we do is we open up MIDI transform and we go to reverse pitch. So you saw previously in the last video, we talked about reverse position to kind of flip that way. Now we're doing it that way. So here we go. So the choice now is what note are we going to flip this part about? So we start with our melody. Now I'm looking at this the way where it roughly is. It's roughly up here somewhere around, you know, C4 to F5, something in that area. I'm going to choose to flip this about the axis of A. Now the A that I'm going to pick here is this one. It's A4. It's roughly in the middle. And that's why I think that's going to be a really useful option. So I type in A4 here. Now I'm going to select the notes that I want to flip and I'm going to operate. And as you will see, my notes are flipped around the axis. Now, you may be thinking, okay, what happens if I choose a different A? Will the notes still be the same notes? And I can explain that very simply to you. Yes, they will. So if you think about the G that is right next to your A, let me play this for you. So we're up here. So if we've got a G here and we want to flip it around this A, it will end up there. It'll be two semitones away, but in the opposite direction. What happens if I flip it around this one? So still A, I take my G and it's basically an octave minus two semitones. Let's go. An octave minus two semitones takes us to the B, the octave down below the range of the flute, which I should have thought about that before I started that demonstration. But yes, the note will stay the same. It will just be the position of it on the keyboard or on the stave that has changed. So now that we know that the notes will stay the same, we can pick the most suitable axis point that will keep our kind of instrument register, you know, correct. So let's have a look at the strings. Now, I still want to be flipping around A. What A am I going to choose? Well, I think probably A2. Looks like it's the best bet here. So we pick that A2 and off we go. And then we operate flipped. Okay. Now I'm going to look at my bass line. Let's select those notes. And I think I'm going to go, oh, interesting one. I think I'm going to go A0 for this one. So we just simply type in here A0. Can't see around the microphone. Operate. Now, okay, so what do we have now? We have our flipped melody here. We have our flipped chords and our flipped bass. Now, the important thing to note is I'm not expecting this to sound like a fantastically brilliant piece of music, but I'm expecting this to be a kind of graveyard of great fragments that I can use. Let's have a listen, bearing that in mind. Okay, so it's kind of interesting. What's the first thing you notice? Well, the first thing you notice is it sounds a bit more cheerful than the original melody did. Why is that? Now, I'm going to play through and I'm going to describe as I'm playing what we have now. So we now have an A major chord, B minor, F sharp minor, C sharp minor, E, A, so we could either call that C sharp, it could either be based on a C sharp minor, or it could be based on a kind of E6. And then you've got the B minor 11 at the end. Okay, so what do we notice about this? Right, the first thing to notice is that in the original chord sequence, we had one flat. So our original melody was in the key of D minor, natural minor. So one flat, and the C is just a normal minor seventh from the root note. So we might also call that the Aeolian mode. Now, you'll remember that that starts on the 6th degree of a major scale. That's if you play the major scale from the 6th degree. So in this case, we've got one flat, so we're talking about F major. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then when you play that scale based on the 6th step of that major scale in F, we get the Aeolian, and that is D Aeolian mode. Now, what key are we in, or what mode are we in here when we've got three sharps? Now, you might think that there are two options, but I will draw your attention back to the fact that we flipped around the axis of A. So if our root note was D, and we flip it around the axis of A, that's a perfect fourth, which takes us down to E. So we are in E, that's our root note. So knowing that we're in E, then let's have a look. We've got three sharps. So we don't have the D sharp in the major scale. We have that very definite flattened 7 there. So that tells us that we are in the Mixolydian mode. Mixolydian, if you recall, is on the 5th degree of a major scale. So E is the 5th degree of A major. And if we play the scale from the E, then that's our Mixolydian mode. So we've noticed that we flipped our Aeolian and it's turned into Mixolydian. That's really, really important, really, really useful. And I want you to remember that. I'm going to show you a couple of other examples and what scale leads to what other scale, or what mode leads to what other mode. But for now, let's just consider what we can do with that. Right, so E Mixolydian, and we have these it's really got a brighter major sound. So this is an incredibly useful way for us to grab a few fragments of our original melody with the inversion applied. So they're still related, but we've got the building blocks here to create a completely different feel in our music, but this is still based on the original melody. So we have opened a door, if you like, into a more major, brighter sound from a darker sound. And the interesting thing is that we can link these up, and I'm going to show you how I would do that now. I mean, I'm just kind of improvising, but let's have a quick go. So a little clumsy. I know I'm not really putting any kind of finessing into it, any kind of refinement. I'm simply smashing from the original into the flipped version and back into the original. And you can see that this is going to give you a really interesting place to go. So now, the other great thing and mind-blowing thing about this is that we've just flipped it around one note. We've flipped it around A. We have all the other notes that we can flip it around as well. So you could flip it around G, you could flip it around B flat. You could do all kinds of different transformations here to unlock all kinds of different keys as well, and other root notes for your new mode. So if you wanted to go from this kind of D Now, let's say we did flip it around B flat, just as that's the last thing that I said out loud. Then what would happen? Well, we go into that G flat. Now, the G flat becomes G flat mixolydian. So thinking about that is like the G flat, or F sharp if you want to simplify things, but is the fifth note of the of the B major scale. So, and if we play that from the F, so you've got all the black notes, but just the E and the B, or if we're still thinking in flat terms, that's C flat and F flat. So we go from our kind of this thinking to and then back again. Okay, so are you seeing why I'm getting excited now? This is just a way to break out of the kind of traditional key change paradigm and actually unlock a world of really unusual and interesting changes. And it's incredibly simple because you just have to think about that modal shift that happens when you invert. Now, what about the other modes? Where do we start and where do we end? Well, okay, so let's start. So we've got the Aeolian, which is the sixth degree of the major scale, flipping to mixolydian. Now, our Lydian, so that's our kind of our Lydian, you'd feel, with that sharp 4 in there. It's the movie scale, if you like. It's, however you want to describe it. That one, if you invert it, turns into the Locrian. Why does it turn into the Locrian? Why does that happen? Well, let's look at the mechanics of what's happening. When we look at the spacing of the scale as we travel up the scale, what we're going to do when we flip it is we're going to use the same spacing but going down instead of up. Okay, that's the key thing. You remember when you invert your melody, if you invert it about the root note, let's say you have an F going to an A, then to a B flat, you have to go down a major third, which takes you to from F to D flat. Okay, and then a semitone takes you to C. So you have to, it's got an exact inversion. You can do a diatonic inversion as well. You can have chromatic or diatonic. But personally, I think that the chromatic stuff is the real key here. It's the really interesting thing that unlocks all this useful stuff. So back to our thing. Why does this happen? Right, well, what do we have? I'm going to play in both directions and then we'll isolate the downward one. But watch what I'm doing now. So where do those two semitones happen? They happen between 4 and 5, and then between 7 and 8. So isolating downwards, 4 to 5, 7 to 8. Okay. And what's that? That gives us the Locrian scale. The Locrian scale is the one that is on the 7th degree of the major scale. Let's just think about that. So If F is the 7th degree of a major scale, then that scale has to be G flat major, okay? So this is how the scales convert, how the scales invert. Let's look at our harmonic minor, which is our Aeolian. And again, we'll do the up and down at the same time. So where are the semitones here? Well, 2 to 3, 5 to 6, 2 to 3, 5 to 6, so you see, so that gives us our Mixolydian, which is kind of like the major scale, but with a flat 7, well, without the sharpened 7, with the 7 down a half step. Okay, I think I've kind of milked that particular bit for long enough. If you're working in Sibelius, this is where you find invert. And again, you simply select the axis that you want to invert around and you get the output. If you want to kind of work out your themes and your fragments and all that kind of stuff away from the door, then that's the way to do it. I'm going to chuck up a chart on screen now, which is quite an interesting thing because it shows us that if we consider the modes from the most sharp to the most flat, so in other words, from the brightest to the darkest, then we see a symmetry about these different mode transformations, these inverses, where we go from, where we go to. This is another thing that you can hear, obviously, from the example that I've played you really, really clearly, but it also helps you to understand that when we invert, we are changing ourselves from the light side, from the brighter side of the harmonic spectrum to the darker side, or vice versa. Again, incredibly useful to think about that and remember to use this tool in your own compositions to give you some extra stuff, extra material to work with. Really, really useful. I can't emphasize it enough. Go away, have a play with it, have a think about it, and leave any ideas, comments, anything in the comments below. Be really interested to see what people think about this, and no doubt there are some extraordinarily well qualified professorial types among you who might have some other insights way beyond my meager understanding of it. But I love it for its utility. That's the thing that is really great in my mind. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see when I put up a new video. Ding the bell. I'm off my Christmas and New Year hiatus now. And so I'll be posting much more regularly as the year progresses. Thank you again. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.